You hear all the time how Pilates is an integrated system between the mat work, the reformer, and all of the other pieces of apparatus. But has anyone ever actually showed you what that means? I'm Danica Kellam-Derolu, the creator of the SomaFix Pilates method, and I'm coming to you from my studio, Pilates 804 in Richmond, Virginia. And today I'm going to show you the 5 basic traditional mat exercises and how they translate to beginning exercises on the reformer, so you can get a better sense of what it means when we say Pilates is a system. So we're coming down onto the mat, and the first 5 basic exercises are the 100, the roll up, the single leg circle, rolling like a ball, and spine stretch forward. Now, these 5 exercises are considered basic because they make the 5 most common shapes that we use across all of the system and all of the pieces of apparatus. It's not all of the shapes. You're going to notice that there's not as much lateral work or extension that is loaded, but these 5 shapes are the foundation, and what they ask for of the body is, again, seen across the system. So with your 100, you lie back and you look for not so much of this belly button into the spine or even this idea of what is imprint or neutral pelvis. What we really want is the feeling that we are keeping our body tall up the mat to mimic how tall we need to be in gravity. And the point of the 100 is to be able to make a little bit of light thoracic and cervical flexion while maintaining a nice long lumbar and grounded pelvis. As the legs reach out, the opposition has to pull back, and gravity is loading all of my front body. It's a breathing in and a breathing out where you actually sink and zip and scoop. Breathing in and breathing out. As you advance, the legs get lower, requiring more pull and opposition so we don't end up in this thing and where we don't end up where we just want to fall. And again, you have to think about where we are pushing back into the load that is pushing into us. The roll up is then saying, let's open that front body, stretch it out of that 100. Where, okay, what if I arch my back a little bit? What if my ribs play? No big deal, because as I roll up with an inhale and then begin my exhale, I'm going to come back into that same contraction. Now I actually have to reach in and lift my lower body to come around. Where everybody gets in trouble is where they think it's about touching your nose to your knees, touching your toes, and now you can see how I've actually collapsed in space. This is generally where we see a lot of people start. So rather than having them start from the mat, let's start from seated, upright. Now we're dealing with the gravitational load. So already we have to inhale up tall. And as I exhale, I'm going to take that first action of my pelvis articulating to send sits bones to heels. My spine comes into flexion from that engagement of my abdominals. What if I just go here and exhale, come back forward? And a beginner can gradually work back farther and farther. The farther back you go, the more gravity and load you have to push into on the way up. At the end of the day, the goal is free articulation of all of your vertebra, going into flexion that is supported from your abdominal contraction, and then coming into an easy light extension where we then open up the front body. Next is our single leg circle, and it's exactly what it sounds like. One leg makes a circle. I consider it the hardest beginning exercise because first, as a leg comes up, we gauge pelvic and lumbar stability versus letting everything wiggle around. And as the leg comes higher, we can gauge hamstring flexibility against that tall stability that you need in your spine. And it should work all of the muscles of the hip as the ball rotates in the socket. Inner thigh pulls across, then going into the hamstring, into that outer glute, up into the hip flexor, and home. And it does have a rhythm to it. Catch it. You do 5 each direction. Right now, I'm just going to do 2 because I want to get you to the reformer. Quick change. And I want you to rethink about when we get to the reformer, how we're still going to ask for the muscles of the hip to be able to pass the work around the ball as it moves inside the socket. From here, we come right on up with an easy, swift motion to rolling like a ball. That's the pro transition. Most people by this point in the mat class are grumbling and moaning at you, but let them get up any way they want to. Now, if I just give in to gravity and drop, you're going to see me bottom out in my low back. And you see me need to throw and then rearrange. Where you really want to initiate is from the idea of the hamstrings pulling sits bones up so much, causing the lumbar to come into more flexion, that I have to just allow myself back, lift my hips, come home, and coming home without collapsing into the pull of my hip flexors. I can't relax my hip flexors here because I'm in loaded hip flexion. So if I relax my hip flexors, I'm probably going to drop a lot of weight through my core and my back. But it's not my head that takes me back. It's not just dropping back towards the mat. It is the idea that I literally pull my sits bones up over and I work to keep that contraction. Exhale to hold the shape. You can play with inhaling back and exhaling forward or reversing that breath. Either way, we're going to see this shape loaded and with different moving parts, weights, and springs in just a moment. The last of the basic 5, the spine stretch forward. Now, we're putting our legs as our stability stabilizing anchors. And whether they need to be a little turned out, a little bit bent, if we're really unflexible, really tight and compressed, we might need to elevate so that the line of the femur and the angle of the femur is more open, allowing us to get taller. Now, if we start this as a single action of the belly button, did you see how I actually got shorter in my waist? That's not the goal. It's not shorten waist forward. It's spine stretch forward, okay? So we're going to inhale. And yes, I'm going to contract. And yes, I'm going to pull together. But as that happens, it brings the weight of my head, brings me back into that thoracic flexion. And here's the moment where my extremities, arms and legs, are reaching out, but my exhale is contracting together and back, causing me to get deeper into that spinal flexion. And then my inhale fills up my upper back, brings me up. I love doing all kinds of arm choreography in my spine stretch forward because it just feels good. It brings the tissue up, out, and around with you. And again, as I exhale, I'm trying to root my sits bones and anchor my legs versus hang off my sacrum or hang off any flexibility that I have in my hamstrings, which is considerable with my history, right? Do you see the difference there versus here? Again, giving into gravity, me saying, even in the back of my neck, just because my head's down, I'm still fighting gravity, stacking back up. And you find the articulation of your spine reach out over. Now, we're going to take all 5 of these exercises to the reformer. And I'm going to explain how the shapes don't really change. But as we move the shapes around on the reformer and have to integrate and move with the spring that is giving us, yes, resistance, but it's also giving us tension and it's also giving us feedback. You're going to see how it makes the exercises stronger by having the help of the apparatus. Here we go. First, we're going to look at the 100 on the reformer. The 100 is one of the few exercises that is choreographically kept the same on all pieces of apparatus and is done on all pieces of apparatus. It's where the spring is coming from that challenges that load into the front body, our shoulder integration, and that stability and strength in our hips, which are also part of our powerhouse. So we're going to come on to the reformer. We're going to lie down, but we're going to have a little bit of distance away from the shoulder blocks because we want to curve up. If you're in the shoulder blocks, you will not make it. You'll get stuck. So the minute I engage these handles and bring the weight of the lever, I have to automatically come into that work of my center and core and feel that grounding and anchoring in my upper back and down through my pelvis. As I curve up into my 100, yes, my elbows are going to straighten, but it is that work that you saw in the mat work, where to come into the 100, we had to exhale, bring chin to chest, bring the thoracic spine, and reach out. When I have the handles, we will be pulling the movement of the carriage and the load of the springs into this work. Therefore, loading it, making it stronger, because the stronger we are, the more fun we're going to have in all this work. So as I pull, notice that there are no risers. So I'm really bringing the spring from underneath of me up into my front body. I'll pull my knees back in, bend my elbows, and then it is an action of my upper abs releasing so that my back can bring me back to the mat. Now notice I said bring me back to the mat, not release, not let go, not let gravity win. That's the equivalent of dropping weights in the gym. We don't drop our bodies in space. So on an exhale. Now, here's something I challenge you with at home. Pump with your arms a little bit higher above your thighs versus watch what happens if I'm down here. This is now much harder for me to keep that work up into those upper abs and that connection of my lower abs coming too. This becomes more honestly about my upper back. But we really want to, again, load that front body. Try that challenge. Bend in and roll down. Now, Notice I said I do not have risers. If you have risers and ropes and loops instead of handles, what that means is the line of pull of the rope or the leather, maybe you have leather, but if there's a riser, the line of pull is now bringing more weight from above you into that abdominal work along with the spring. Therefore, if you're working on, say, 2 reds, the risers will make those 2 reds feel heavier than if they are down in the wheels in this traditional styled peak reformer. That's a really important thing to know about the styling of reformers from traditional to contemporary in terms of what the risers do. There are a lot of people who do not understand that that riser really does change the weight of the spring. So keep that in mind when you're making your spring choices. Moving on to the roll-up. I've brought my short box onto the reformer. I've got on all my springs so that the carriage stays nice and secure and my feet go underneath the foot strap. Now, I can choose to have legs together, which is more what we do in the mat and the roll-up. Legs apart in your roll-up technically makes it a different exercise called your neck pull. Okay? That's referring to the mat. But here, I'm going to choose to keep my legs together. You could also work your abductors and press apart. But I'm going to find myself get a nice hug, and I've got to find that nice spine stretch forward as I then curl the tail under to initiate rolling back. Unlike on the mat, I now have this strap as a piece of the apparatus, something for me to really focus on pulling back away from as I maintain spinal flexion. And I'll exhale and come forward. And at a certain point, the pelvis needs to be able to lift and rotate. For a lot of people, that will mean bending the knees so that you don't end up collapsing. So if I am here, the first thing I need to do is wake up the backyard. So I'm going to squeeze and sits bones reach into the heels. Now my abdominals are working and they've already gotten all that load from the spring in the 100, so they know how to pull together and exhale, come home. Now, unlike on the mat, you have a stopping point. On the reformer, and now I'm going to go ahead and abduct, find a little bit more support out through the outer hips, right? As I go back, I'm going to keep turning sits bones, turn, turn, turn. And then I can find extension that I can't find on the mat. As I come back up, I'm going to stop talking because I need my exhale. This moment, the moment where you come around versus shove forward, roll up and around. Doing it on the reformer, on the short box, makes you understand how much on the mat you need to keep that opposition from inside yourself. It's never wrong to use a foot strap on the mat either. If he didn't want you to use them, he wouldn't have put them on the equipment. I love traditional equipment. My personal favorite piece of equipment to work out on is Balanced Body's Contrology, which is a very true classical piece of equipment. This is a peak reformer that is traditionally styled, but it's not 100% authentic if you really want to split hairs. But on all traditional styled pieces of apparatus, you have handles and you generally have leather, okay? This is setting 1, your normal standard setting that you saw me for 100. If I want to make short straps for short spine massage, because we do not have the double loop system, what we do is we feed the leather through the handle, drop the handle down, and now you have a short foot loop foot strap. However, when we want to do our leg circles, our frog, what so many now call feet and straps, we make a third setting where we add an extender strap. We clip it through the leather and the handle, and now we have a long strap. I'm on 2 springs down there at the edge of the carriage, and when we come on, we put them on just like you would the loops, okay? We sit, we swivel, we come on down, and now let's be in the shoulder block so we can really feel the spring connect us up into them. We grab a hold of the straps. We want to make sure that the metal clasp of the extender strap both are facing the outside. If they're on the inside, they could rub and potentially come unclipped, and then that's bad news bears. So we bring our feet in to our long straps, and we're going to find our frog. I could do single leg circle the same choreographed way as single leg footwork, one foot on the bar, one leg in the air, and just like from mat, do single leg circle. It would give you that connectivity that you need of the leg that stays on the ground in the mat. But I would rather right now relate the idea of the hips working in a circular fashion around the musculature, because that's really what single leg circle is about, as well as all of the rest of the strengthening stuff. So in my frog, as I go through a sagittal plane of extension in the hips and knees, flexion in the hips and knees, we're finding that initiation from hammies and glutes to get extension. Now, unlike when I do this in mat work, where all the load is coming from gravity above me, now the load is more coming from underneath of me as the spring. So now I have to initiate more from the back body to press out. This is therefore ensuring that I get a nice stretch up as the hammies and glutes eccentrically contract, and then they're storing that power to concentrically contract back out. And we're going to get that nice play between the hip flexors and the back of the hips. Now, when we go into circles with both feet, it does seem like your feet are going to make a box, but we're going to come into hip flexion where we still keep that anchored pelvis. A, B, duction, outer hips pulling apart, not drifting. You see how that's a drift? Whew, engage. Hamstrings, inner thighs squeeze. Now, we don't get to do the cross like we do in the single leg circle, so we really emphasize that squeeze together to access some of that power. It's the coming up where so many people get in trouble, because the ropes, the leather, this can just pull you and dump you and bully your low back. And we don't want to do our leg circles from our low back, right? So everything we learned as a single leg circle actually becomes a little bit easier for the brain as we do both legs doing the same choreography. Here's the reverse at the same time. Because when we do the single leg circle, we're really supposed to keep one side stable and just work the mobility of the other hip. Therefore, when we're doing it here on the reformer with that added movement of the carriage, we are also challenging our sacral stability. And that makes it so much easier once you've conquered it here to feel it on the mat. Bringing rolling like a ball to the reformer. It's not safe to rock back and forth on here. You don't have enough room. You'd eventually fall off and into the spring well. So what we're really talking about in the beginning reformer is your stomach massage. It's an exercise everybody loves to hate. And where is the massage? Let's talk about it. Now, the way to get onto the reformer traditionally is actually a very advanced mount. You need a lot of strength in your triceps, and I'm going to show it to you. But most people are going to just need to sit down on the black pad, swivel their feet, press their hips forward for some traction on top of the black pad, and then grab the front of the reformer. And then they still wiggle, and they still fidget. It is that wiggling and fidgeting is part of the reason why the traditional mounts and dismounts exist. They're trying to make you get in and out of the exercise as efficiently as possible. So let me show you what the traditional mount is so you can see exactly why it's also really advanced. Again, for a beginner exercise. I know. Here we go. I'm going to put a hand, ball of the foot, and I'm going to find that lift and press up, scoop sits bones towards the heels as I press forward, sit down on the black pad, and now I have to think about that moment and rolling like a ball where I'm coming back up out of the mat, rounding forward to bring my hands forward. Bam, I'm in position, ready to go. Pressing out, exhaling as we come in. Using the work of my hips to keep sits bones under so that I stay in lumbar flexion. And then I'm using the strength in the back of my shoulders and upper powerhouse to keep the curve of the upper body. It is a complete C curve, slightly tipped back. I'm not sitting straight up. I'm under. And what we're figuring out here is in rolling like a ball, that moment of initiation from the power of the hips to lift and rock back, we're strengthening that as a press. Okay? Also, we're strengthening our hip flexors to act on our lumbar spine because the psoas is the only muscle that connects the lumbar spine to the leg. All other muscles either connect the leg to the pelvis or the pelvis to the low back. But the psoas is the only thing connecting your leg to your lumbar. In addition, with your quads, they flex the hip. But your psoas is also responsible for the shape, weight, and decompression moving through your lumbar. So, as I go through the second shape, which is arms back, again, I am feeling that work of sits bones under, abs up and in, and instead of collapsing, I am finding more strength in my upper body so that I can keep strong up through my lumbar spine in this different shape. The third and final shape, which I'm going to reach through and drop the spring, is the reach. Press out, exhale in. The idea of the massage is that with every exhale and lift and scoop, you're able to pull and lift more weight, separating and differentiating it from the work of your legs, hips, and thighs, which is, again, a conversation between hip flexors, back of the hips, inner thighs, and an elongation of your outer hips to come in versus this, which is what happens. And by the end of it, you want to die. But that is the point of the exercise, to show you how hard you have to work against the forces of these springs, because that is how hard we have to work against the forces of gravity all the time. Traditional reformers do not have latched or secured foot bars. If I pull up on this foot bar, the lever moves and you will fall. Okay? So anytime your hands touch this bar, you are supposed to keep and must keep downward pressure into the bar. This means that whenever your hands are on the bar, doesn't matter the exercise, when you are closing the carriage, it is not initiated from a pull of the arms, making it a shoulder-heavy exercise. To close the springs and maintain downward pressure to keep that bar down, you have to feel the pull and the scoop of your powerhouse bringing the spring back together. Elephant is how we teach this in the beginning reformer, and it is in direct correlation to the shape you should arrive in your spine stretch forward. Okay, let me show you. To mount, you will take one hand, keep that downward pressure. Ideally, we keep all 5 fingers on one side of the bar. That is less instinct to pull, okay? Because as soon as your thumb goes around anything, we immediately want to give more of a pull response than a push. So I'm going to do hand. I'm going to bring my opposite foot on the reformer, and the reformer is going to stay closed because I'm already going to scoop up and lift. Find the other hand, the other foot, and I arrive in my elephant, which I'm going to show you a modification right now just to prove the point of my spine stretch forward. I've brought my feet into the middle. I might have cut off my head, but it's okay. As I think scoop up, in, out, and over, I'm reaching out to the foot bar, going forward, grounding through my feet. That's the same shape and movement of my spine stretch forward. Now I'm just going to slide the heels back, and I'm going to try and maintain that flexion and that lumbar whole spinal flexion because of the concentric flexion of my abdominals. And now I press out through the hamstrings and down into the heels. I can't pull on the bar, so I can't pull back forward. I have to exhale, pull in, pull in, pull in. And I'm going to inhale and exhale. And every time I give that exhale, it pulls the springs, pulls the springs, pulls the springs. Now let me give you the visual. If I just lower the foot bar and have a seat, and I'm out again in my spine stretch forward now, that same work that initiates, brings my head, and then sequentially the thoracic stacks back up, that's the same work that was pulling the spring back together. By loading that work in the same shape, basically flipped upside down, now when I get here to say, here we go, abs, I have to call on that feeling of closing the spring And it gives me the flexion in the musculature in the front body to give me the actual spinal flexion that I'm looking for. All of the mat exercises correlate on the reformer and all across the rest of the studio. That is what it means when we say Pilates is a system. If you really want to learn more about how the mat and the reformer correlate so you can bring this into your teaching practice or start your teaching journey from the ground up, SomaFix is launching the Mat plus Reformer Certificate of Teaching Proficiency, training you to teach exactly this way within the system and the logical progression of Pilates across the mat and reformer. And if you love it, you can come back and join us for the full apprenticeship to get your comprehensive training. We launch this fall, and I hope to see you there.